As my sister-in-law stepped into the house, she exclaimed, "This is much nicer than I imagined. If you remodel it, it might even look like a new house." The moment I revealed that this place was inherited from my parents, her attitude visibly became colder. "Does that mean it's in your name? Do you not have any plans to change it to your husband's name now that you're married?" she asked. Having it in my husband's name would be convenient for her. Ever since then, my sister-in-law began to frequently harass me and my sister's family. I am 35 years old, and I hold a manager position at my company. I am married, but I have no children. That day was a rare holiday for me, and I was doing a major cleaning of the house with my sister, her husband, and their son and daughter. My sister's family and mine lived together in my parents' house. After our parents passed away, I was the one who inherited the house. I had to take over the monthly mortgage payments, but I am attached to the house and have always wanted to live here. The mortgage will be paid off soon. My sister moved out for college and lived elsewhere after her marriage. Half a year ago, we had to temporarily move into this house because our previous residence needed some major renovations. This house is spacious but has gradually aged over the years. "This place might need some repairs soon," my sister muttered while cleaning. At that moment, a loud voice came from the entrance. "Sister, are you there? Please open up." Looking outside, I saw my sister-in-law with a lot of luggage. "What happened? What's with the luggage?" I asked, to which she replied loudly from outside the door, "Just hurry up and let me in." When my sister opened the front door, my sister-in-law immediately walked into the living room and sat down on the sofa. When asked why, she bluntly replied, "Because I'm getting a divorce." Her husband works for a major corporation and earns a considerable income, so there had to have been something serious for her to decide on divorce. As I pondered the connection between her coming to our house and her divorce, she said, "Anyway, that's why I'll be living here from now on." The truth is, she had always had her eyes on this house. Changing the name on the deed isn't too difficult, but handing it over to my sister-in-law like that would equate to me abandoning the house. I had anticipated she might do something like this. If I refused, my greedy and arrogant sister-in-law would forcefully demand the change of ownership. Eventually, she might even forcibly change the name herself. Unfortunately, my husband sided with her and wouldn't listen to us. So, I decided to put into action a plan I had thought of before. After exchanging looks with my sister and her husband, I nodded and said, "All right. Then I'll handle the name change for you." "Oh, you're quite receptive today," my sister-in-law replied. But she was surprised when my sister's husband interjected. "However, there are some issues with changing the ownership." "What issues?" As my sister-in-law grew more irritated, he explained, "When changing property ownership, a specific reason is usually required, such as for inheritance or property sale. So, we will need a concrete reason for the change." Her response to my husband's explanation was dismissive. "What do you mean by that? Just make up any reason." But it's not that simple, especially with legal procedures involved at the land registry. "Then, shall we say it's a transfer from you to me? That would mean you have to pay gift tax." "Gift tax? I don't have that kind of money." As she grew angrier, she confronted my sister's husband. I sighed at her attitude and said, "Then, how about you buy the house from me? Buy a house when I'm getting divorced? Where would I get the money for that?" "Well, buying the house would be an asset, and you could sell it later for a large sum," I suggested. Her expression softened, and she smirked mischievously. "All right, then I'll buy the house from you." "Really? Is that okay for you?" "But there's another problem." "What is it this time?" "Yes, as my brother-in-law pointed out earlier, there are several issues," I said, exasperated by my sister-in-law's irritable demeanor. My brother-in-law began to explain the second problem. When purchasing the house from me as a family transaction, if the price deviates significantly from the market value, the difference could be considered a gift, potentially incurring gift tax. Upon hearing this, my sister-in-law sighed, "Taxes again." Seeing her reaction, I suggested, "Then, we have no choice but to ask a real estate agent to mediate." "Mediation? That means we have to pay a brokerage fee." right? Yes, but it aligns the price with the market rate and saves us from the hassle of paperwork. I replied, well, that might be the quickest solution. Then let's go with that, please. My sister-in-law said, leaving everything to us. However, this was the best choice for us. We contacted a real estate company where my brother-in-law works and a judicial scrivener to proceed with the sale of the house and the change of ownership. While I was searching for a new place to move to, my husband came home. I told my husband about my sister-in-law's intention to live here, and as expected, he was overjoyed. Are you sure that's okay? You always said you didn't get along with my sister. It doesn't matter. I've decided to leave here along with my sister's family. What? I'm asking for a divorce. I've reached my limit with things, including my arrogant sister-in-law and you. What are you saying? I began to explain my reasons for leaving. Shortly after marrying my husband, his sister, whom I had met once at our wedding, suddenly paid us a visit at our home. As soon as she came in, she happily exclaimed, "This house is nicer than I expected. Renovating it might make it like new." As I nodded, I mentioned I inherited this place from my parents, to which she suddenly took on a look of displeasure. That means it's in your name, right? Don't you plan to change it to your husband's name after marriage? She abruptly asked, leaving me puzzled. Looking back, she might have been plotting something from that moment on. Having the house in my husband's name would have been more convenient for her. But back then, I didn't realize and let the conversation slide, which seemed to anger her. Since then, she developed hostility towards me and my sister's family. During the New Year holidays, when we visited our in-laws, my sister and I were sent shopping by my sister-in-law and forced to pay for everything we were asked to buy. After that experience, we never set foot in our in-laws' house again. However, she continued to show up unannounced at our house, demanding to stay, often barging in. Even after living with my sister's family for half a year, her behavior didn't change. Worse, she started to expect the same treatment from my sister's family without reservation. When I told her, as a married woman, "You should rely on your husband," she snapped back, "That's none of your business. Don't interfere in other people's family affairs." When I asked my husband to do something about his sister, he became upset and said incomprehensibly, "She's been through a lot since getting married. It's probably wife and mother-in-law issues. Try to understand." This was the trigger for me to consider divorce. In addition, one day when I asked my husband about his destination when going out and got no answer, I began to suspect him of infidelity. After discussing it with my sister's family, we decided to distance ourselves from my sister-in-law and husband and to get revenge. For the first step, I hired a detective to investigate my husband's suspected affair. I then began searching for information on the internet to solve the sister-in-law problem. And finally, I found an effective and convincing method. Meanwhile, the results of the investigation into my husband's infidelity arrived, showing clear evidence of his misconduct. If my sister-in-law made the next move, we would be ready to proceed with our plan. Together with my sister's family, I waited eagerly for this decisive opportunity. And today, with my sister-in-law demanding the change in name, which would alter the ownership of my house, the time had come to execute our plan. When my husband returned home, I declared my plans for divorce. "You were cheating, weren't you?" "What? What do you mean?" My husband was completely shocked. However, I continued to cross-examine him calmly and based on my evidence. My sister-in-law had also fallen perfectly into our plan. "Argue or stay silent. It's up to you. I have gathered enough evidence. Don't resist unnecessarily and just sign the divorce papers quickly." But legal battle or mediation, either is fine. The divorce is a done decision. My husband was at a loss for words. At that moment, my sister-in-law appeared and said, "Big brother, what are you dawdling for? If you're free, help me with my luggage. I need you to wait a moment. First, I need my husband to sign these divorce papers." "What? Divorce? What do you mean?" "We've decided to get divorced. If you plan to live here, I don't need to stay." My sister and her husband then followed my lead. Moreover, we're planning to leave this place too. This house is yours to use as you wish." Hearing my words, my sister-in-law smirked and said, "So it's no longer your house or your sister's house, right?" "Exactly. I have the money from selling the house and the divorce settlement, so finding a new home won't be difficult." Hearing this, my husband signed the divorce papers reluctantly. After receiving the divorce papers, my sister's family and I left our former home. That night, my sister, her husband, and I stayed in a hotel. The next day, we started the house selling process. First, we created the official sales documents through my brother-in-law's real estate company and a lawyer, and proceeded with the sale of the house to my sister-in-law. Of course, my sister-in-law needed to be involved in the contract, but she just complained. "Oh boy, what's this? I don't get it. Just call me when all the documents are ready. I don't care about the content. I just have to pay, right? Changing the ownership to me is all that matters." Eventually, my sister's husband, the lawyer, and I took care of all the procedures, and my sister-in-law disappeared. We didn't come to an agreement, but that was expected. I didn't think she could endure the tedious process of the contract. In the end, she only participated in the initial stages of confirming the purchase intent and signing the final documents. Afterwards, we completely moved our belongings out of the house so that we could hand it over. At the same time, the divorce was finalized, and my ex-husband had to pay me $25,000 in damages. After that, the payment for the house was transferred in full to my account from my former sister-in-law. She was ignorant about the mortgage and probably in debt now, but that was no longer my concern. A few weeks later, everything was settled. When I visited the house again, now owned by my ex-husband and former sister-in-law, I could hear their heated argument from outside. "It's because of your debt that I'm working nonstop, and I'm being chased down for the damages I owe. I didn't know that the house was that expensive. It's common sense." "Well, I didn't know that, so it can't be helped. Don't make excuses. You should have learned this yourself. Now I have to pay for the house because of you, and I still owe for damages." Hearing the unexpected word damages, I sensed an opportunity. I rang the doorbell and prepared to face my ex-husband. "Oh, it's you. What do you want?" "I'm busy right now." "What do I want?" "I'm here to collect this month's payment." "How? What do you mean this month's payment?" "I've already paid this month's portion, including the house payment." "I've received that, but there's still something you haven't paid for, right?" As my ex-husband looked puzzled at my words, my former sister-in-law appeared from the back, directing her anger at me. "What are you doing? You didn't tell me a word about the price of this house." "What do you mean?" "About this house. I wasn't informed it was so expensive. Didn't you read the documents I sent?" I wasn't paying attention to that. Indeed, I had sent all the necessary documents to my former sister-in-law, but it was her responsibility to read them. I sold the house at a fair price. My ex-husband seemed to agree as he told her to be quiet to avoid further complications. Then he asked me, "What were you referring to about this month's payment?" "I'm talking about the land leasing fee for the land that this house is on." Both my ex-husband and former sister-in-law looked puzzled. They clearly didn't understand this fact. I had sold only the house, retaining the leasing rights to the land. This meant that while the house belonged to my former sister-in-law, I owned the land that it was built on and was therefore entitled to receive a monthly fee. The land rental fee is usually determined through negotiation, but since my former sister-in-law had overlooked the procedure, I set it at $3,000 per month. Both my ex-husband and former sister-in-law were shocked and outraged upon hearing this amount. Unbelievable. Paying $3,000 every month for the land? Yes, but you signed the contract. Also, you'll be responsible for the property taxes for the house, as stated in the contract. Didn't you read it? This is ridiculous. If that's the case, we'll just sell the house. Unfortunately, that's not an option. As long as I, as the landowner, don't permit the sale, you can't sell the house due to the leaseholder rights. Explaining this left my former sister-in-law in utter disbelief. Really? Is that true? Well, it's up to you. Either pay the $3,000 every month or give up the house. I told her, Given their debts for the damages and the house purchase, it was clear that they couldn't afford this new monthly fee. Ultimately, my former sister-in-law chose to return the house to me. Since this trouble was caused by my ex-husband and former sister-in-law, they bore all the transaction fees. Thus, we managed to reclaim our house. Apparently, my former sister-in-law had borrowed the money for the house from her parents, who, upon learning about this incident, were outraged at both her and my ex-husband and demanded repayment. Currently, my ex-husband is juggling daytime work and a night job, and my former sister-in-law is working at a supermarket and a night job as well. What's more, my former sister-in-law was apparently having an affair, which was discovered by her now ex-husband, leading to demands for further damages. I was the one who told her husband. Since then, my sister's family finished their remodeling and returned to their own home, and I have been enjoying living alone. Oh, the car that I just bought. I'll take care of it. Since the payment contract is in your name, I'm counting on you to keep up with the loan payments. Actually, I've met a woman I'm really attracted to. As he told me this, my husband disappeared like mist before my eyes. All that was left in my hands was my only daughter and a massive debt of $500,000. My name is Beth, and I am 40 years old. I'm a woman who balances housework and my job at a business site in the metropolitan area. I have a small family with my spouse Chris, who is the same age, and my 11-year-old daughter, Rose. Since she was young, Rose has been exceptionally bright. By the time she entered elementary school, she was already proficient in reading and writing English as well as in Spanish, and she knew various encyclopedias by heart. She possesses such an enigmatic talent and would challenge me like a debater on news topics. Her academic performance is outstanding among her classmates, and her thinking speed is fast. She's so intelligent to the extent that I can't believe she's my own child. As a parent, I am simply amazed by her brilliance. On the other hand, Chris was always lazy and fickle, never sticking to any job for a long time, always quitting after a short period. He changed jobs at numerous companies, and just when it seemed like his salary was finally increasing, he would switch jobs again, returning to a starting salary. Our savings never grew, and out of anxiety for the future, I once thought about quitting my job to focus on raising Rose and developing her potential. But if I were to leave my job, our household finances would collapse. Thus, I have reluctantly continued to work full-time all these years. However, recently Chris's job finally stabilized. He surpassed his previous longest tenure of 1 year by a significant margin, now continuing to work at the same place for 3 years, and he has secured a stable income as a full-time employee. Previously, he had been simply lazy. But something changed, and he began to desire to visit various places as a family, to nurture Rose's intellectual curiosity, and to create family memories. We took a leap of courage and upgraded from the small car we used to drive to a spacious wagon worth $60,000. This wagon was a large vehicle that could also be used for camping, with a spacious interior that allows for a simple bed to be installed inside. But since Chris, who had just become a full-time employee, could not pass the loan credit check, I ended up taking out the loan. I wasn't particularly surprised by this. After all, the mortgage was also in my name. And then, after a long wait, the day of delivery for the new wagon finally arrived. That day, I couldn't possibly take time off from work, so I had Chris go pick up the car. During my shift, I saw a message from Chris on my mobile phone, and my heart froze in an instant. I'll take care of the new car. Since the payment contract is in your name, I'm counting on you to keep up with the loan payments. I couldn't understand the sudden text message and immediately called Chris. I didn't expect him to answer the phone right away, but to my surprise, he did. What do you want? It's not a matter of what I want. What does this message mean? It means exactly what it says. Chris's voice was indifferent, and I became even more confused. And then Chris revealed something I could never have imagined. Actually, I've fallen for someone seriously. What? What are you talking about? I asked with a trembling voice, shocked. It was meant to be just a little fun at first, but now I want to start over in life with this person. So, this is goodbye to you. With those words, Chris tried to end the call, but just before he hung up, he revealed something even more shocking. Oh, right. I still have the divorce papers that you signed during our previous argument, so I'll go ahead and submit those. With that, before I could say anything, Chris ended the call. I listened to the dial tone in a daze, facing the reality of betrayal, and could only stand there in place, unable to move. Afterward, no matter how many times I tried to contact Chris, he never responded. Unable to focus on work, I headed home, wishing it wasn't real. The truth was, I did sign the divorce papers in a fit of anger during a previous heated argument. When I opened the drawer where I kept those papers, I confirmed that they were indeed gone. Now, I was faced with the repayment of a huge debt of about $500,000, $60,000 for the car loan, and approximately $440,000 for the mortgage. I understood the situation but couldn't bring myself to accept it. I tried contacting Chris numerous times, but whether he was ignoring me or not, he never replied even though he read the messages. It was as if he had vanished from the face of the earth. Rose, who notices even the smallest things, couldn't have been unaware, and a few days later, she looked into my face slowly after dinner. "Mom, are you okay? You've been looking a bit unwell lately, haven't you?" I was about to pretend to be fine, but knowing that Rose could see right through me, I decided to be honest. "Yes, I'm a little tired." It seemed like Rose knew I had more to say. "Mom, that habit of rubbing your hands, that's a sign you're lying, isn't it?" Rose pointed out with her sharp observational skills, and I couldn't help but smile. She continued to speak. "Dad hasn't been home since the day before yesterday. Does that have anything to do with it?" Faced with Rose's clear gaze, I hesitated inside. Then, I took a deep breath to tell Rose the whole truth. I thought it was impossible to keep hiding it anyway. So, I told her everything that had happened. After hearing it all, Rose simply replied with a sigh, "I see. I thought Dad might do something like this." "Really? You're not surprised?" I asked. "Yeah, I'm not surprised. I thought a day like this would come," Rose said. Her calm demeanor, as if she understood everything, was contrary to the turmoil I felt. But deep down, I knew the fact that her parents had split must be hurting her. I apologized to Rose in my heart for my helplessness and worked with renewed vigor the next day as if to sweep everything away. However, inherently not very resilient and mentally fragile, I soon began to suffer physically and mentally from the stressful situation and started to fall ill. On the day of a major inventory at work, I found it difficult to stand and finally collapsed to the floor, exhausted. "Is something wrong?" "Sorry, I feel a bit sick. I'll take a little break." After muttering those words, I lost consciousness. I could hear my colleagues speaking, but I was out cold. When I regained consciousness, I was greeted by a white ceiling and numerous tubes entwined around my body. Apparently, I was in a hospital room, and my colleagues had called an ambulance for me. The diagnosis required further detailed tests, and I was forced to be hospitalized. As I cursed my weakness and wet the pillow with my tears, the usually calm Rose rushed into the hospital room. As I turned around wiping my tears, Rose appealed with a tearful voice. "Mom, are you okay? You're not going to die suddenly, right?" Seeing Rose's usually calm demeanor disturbed for once, I reassured her while gently stroking her hair. "Don't think about that. There's no way I would leave you alone." "Really? That's a relief. I thought my heart would stop." Rose breathed a sigh of relief. She was only 12 years old. For Rose's sake, I resolved to regain my health. But my health was more seriously compromised than I could have imagined. After the diagnosis showed a dark shadow on my organs, the doctor told me it could be malignant, so surgery is advisable, and I decided to undergo the operation. The recovery after the surgery went surprisingly well. Fortunately, the tumor turned out to be benign. I would need regular follow-ups, but I was able to leave the hospital a month after the surgery. On the day of my discharge, exactly 1 month after Chris's disappearance, I returned home to find an envelope in the mailbox. Inside was a reminder notice about the car loan. There should have been enough funds in my bank account, and it didn't make sense that I couldn't make even a mince payment. That was strange. As I hastily checked my internet banking, I couldn't believe the numbers displayed. The balance in my account was only $3.21. This must be a mistake, I thought, and repeatedly clicked the refresh button. But the result was the same. A cold figure of $3.21 appeared on the screen. What? No way. In my memory, there should have been over $40,000 left. While struggling to contain my agitation, I checked the drawer where I kept the bank book only to find it empty. Chris. The perpetrator was obvious, but his whereabouts were unknown, and I had no idea how to proceed. Even disposing of the car was impossible without having it in hand. Since Chris left this house, misfortune has continued. Thinking this, my spirits fell. Rose saw me like this and gently stroked my shoulder. Mom, you look pale. Are you feeling unwell again? I could no longer hide the situation from Rose. I'm physically fine, but Dad didn't just take the car, he took all our savings too. I'm just recovering from an illness and can't go back to work right away, so I'm in quite a pickle. Hearing this, Rose returned with words of encouragement that I hadn't even considered. Mom, it's okay. We are both alive after all. I'll even lie about my age to look for a job on the internet if I have to. You can get good pay with programming. Watching my 12-year-old daughter trying so hard to cheer me up, I scolded myself for my disappointment. I'm sorry for worrying you. Mom will do her best. As I said this with a smile, Rose, unable to hide her joy, mischievously suggested, well, how about we start by taking back the car from Dad? I turned around at Rose's sudden proposal. How can we get it back? The car is registered under Mom's name, right? Yes, that's right. Still not grasping what she was planning. Then, as I listened to Rose's thought-out plan, I was impressed. But immediately after, worry welled up. The problem is, we don't know where Dad is. Looking down, Rose said to me, don't worry, I know. Really? GPS. Remember, we installed it on Dad's phone. Then I remembered. We had given Rose a child's mobile phone and installed GPS tracking apps on our smartphones to avoid the same situation if Rose ever got lost. I've been tracking Dad's movements with that app. He's been moving around a lot. I see. But how will we catch him? Rose secretly smiled and said, don't worry, I've already prepared a plan. Then, as I heard about Rose's plan, I was taken aback by her intelligence. Rose even knew the details about Chris's mistress. Mom, let's give a little punishment to Dad who had betrayed us. And so, Rose and I prepared to take action. Days passed, and one day my cell phone rang. Is that you, Beth? I need help. Sorry, who is this? It was Chris. When I pretended not to know him, he became irritated and said, what's this joke? I'm your husband. Right now, I'm stopped by the police on the street and being questioned. If this continues, they'll take me to the police station. Come quickly and explain. Can't be helped. Understood. Wait there. Knowing that Chris was nearby thanks to the GPS, Rose and I headed to his location. Chris was standing beside the car, being questioned by an officer. I approached the officer and asked, could you let us talk for a bit? And then asked them to leave for a moment. Chris seemed uncomfortable and urged Rose and me to get in the car. Inside sat a young woman, his mistress, glaring at us, but frankly, that was irrelevant. After closing the doors, Chris let out a deep sigh and said, I'm glad you came. But why were those people interrogating me? Why did I do it? Because the car was stolen, so I reported it to the police. Chris's eyes widened in surprise. What? Why would you do that? Why? If someone's car is gone, they naturally report it to the police. Chris still seemed unable to grasp the situation, continuing to insist that between spouses, crimes aren't an issue, and that property is shared, but we were already legally divorced. Such excuses were unacceptable. You're the one who filed the divorce papers. It's a problem if you use someone else's car without permission. I just borrowed it for a bit. Really? You just borrowed it for a bit? Maybe you should have given it back then. As I reached out my hand, Chris seemed to understand and reluctantly handed over the car keys. Rose, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Dad, why did you leave us and go off with her? He surely never expected to be directly questioned by his child. Chris was dumbfounded and rendered speechless. At that moment, the woman began to respond with a sneer to Rose. Clearly, it's because I'm younger and more attractive than your mom. He's totally into me and doesn't need you guys anymore. So, I didn't ask you. Rose cut her off with a forceful shout. Dad, answer me. I want to hear it from you. The woman fell silent at Rose's unexpected response, and Chris also remained silent. If you can't answer, I'll call the police. When Rose declared this, Chris suddenly started to panic. Wait, I'm sorry. I'll talk. The woman's name was Megan. She had joined Chris's workplace as a new employee 4 months ago. They hit it off at a welcome party for new staff and became close quickly, I was told. Shockingly, Megan was already pregnant, and Chris had decided to leave our family to start a new path with her. As for the car, he was apparently attached to it and had been unable to sell it. You've been visiting quite a few places, it seems. Yes, just a little trip. Wait, how do you know that? Do you remember the GPS app? The one I installed earlier on. When I said that, Chris seemed to recall the fact and was visibly disappointed. I did that on purpose. Dad was acting differently, so I suggested using the GPS. Hearing Rose's words, I, too, was inwardly astonished at her intelligence as I listened by her side. Then, I confronted Chris directly and ordered in a somewhat stern tone. Admit you stole my $40,000 and return everything right here, right now. That money was part of our shared marital assets. He defended. How can you say that? That money was from my savings before I was married. It appeared that Chris had already spent the $40,000 with Megan. Brimmed with anger, I could not conceal my surprise and pressed further. Not only did you use the car, but you also spent my savings. This is not a simple crime that can be overlooked. Or did you borrow that money as well? During this time, Megan was quietly trying to leave. However, as she stepped out of the car, she let out a shriek. Standing before her were her parents, their faces filled with anger. Why are my parents here? Because I asked them to come, Rose said calmly. In fact, while I was in the hospital, it seemed Rose had gone to Chris's workplace, pretending to cry. Dad has left our home. Touched by her act, one of the employees gave her the address of Megan's parents' home. Chris and Megan had been openly affectionate at work, always together like a couple. And the fact that they left the company at the same time had raised suspicions of an inappropriate relationship. Hey, old hag, I showed your photo to your parents, and they agreed to talk. Megan had no room left to be shocked at being called old hag. Then, I asked another question. Megan, your belly is quite noticeable. When's the baby due? At that moment, Megan's complexion changed, and all eyes turned to her. Yes, the baby is due in 3 months. That's quite soon. 1, 2, 3. Huh? The math doesn't add up. Chris looked at us, puzzled. What do you mean? It's strange. How can someone with children not understand? The normal pregnancy term is about 9 months. Even if you met this woman and she got pregnant immediately 4 months ago, why would the baby be born in 7 months? Chris seemed to finally grasp the situation. He began to tremble. Megan, did you deceive me? Megan opened her mouth as if to argue. I never thought I'd be caught here. I thought I could deceive someone as simple as you. That's not a joke. You've ruined everything for me. Chris and Megan started an unsightly argument. As this scene unfolded, we called the police again. Soon, a police car arrived. Please, I don't want to deal with the police, Chris pleaded with a pained voice, but Rose and I only gave him a cold look. After you've paid for your crimes, we'll take our time getting the money back. I know where you work. Compensation, child support, half the mortgage, plus the $40,000 I saved. you'll work hard to pay it all back. As Megan watched Chris being taken away by the police, I declared, since you're aware of everything, you'll be considered an accomplice to the theft. If Chris can't repay the money, the burden will fall on you. Be prepared for that. At my words, Megan trembled uncontrollably, looking to her parents for help, but they were in no way going to help her. In this way, we claimed our victory over the odious Chris and Megan. Though they were held accountable for their crimes, due to being first offenders and showing remorse, they were granted bail. However, this was just the beginning of their ordeal of repayment. I managed to extract the full amount they owed me and ensured that Chris would also pay Rose a monthly child support of $600. I arranged a job for Chris at a warehouse subcontracted by my company, so that his income would be directly channeled into repaying me. Although I was also damaged by these events, my health has gradually improved, and now I am back to attending my workplace energetically. Rose and I work together every day. She helps earnestly with the household chores. Just like her name suggests, as her mother, I truly wish for Rose to have a beautiful and